Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us today. I am Mike Condon, one of the franchise development directors here at HomeWell, and super excited to have Brandon Phipps on with us today for our franchisee interview. Brandon is out of the Little Rock, Arkansas area. And really the purpose of today is really just to kind of get to know him a little bit more and give you some perspective on what it's like to be a franchise owner. Really talk about his background and why HomeWell, essentially. So with that, Brandon, first of all, thank you for joining us today. And first and foremost, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your service to our country. Brandon is a former, you were a Ranger or Green Beret?
Well, no, I I started off in the Ranger Indoctrination program, but I wound up going to the 82nd. Yeah.
Awesome. So he jumped out of airplanes for a living. And which if you've never jumped out of an airplane, I recommend it. I love it. I think it's a lot of fun. Some people might disagree. But really where I'd like to kind of kick us off today, Brandon, just give us a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What kind of brought you to, the HomeWell side, but really tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, to be honest, I had nothing to do with healthcare prior to this, aside of my mom. Actually, my mother has been in long-term care. She's been an LPN nurse, charge nurse for 30 years in geriatric and psychiatric hospitals. So, I've kind of been around it a little bit in my life, but ultimately, my background, I was in the military. Obviously, I got a degree in computer science, got a degree in business, got my master's in business, and wound up taking care of my father-in-law all of 2020. So he had cancer. We didn't know what it was originally. And so we wound up helping him, my wife and I, quite a bit over the year prior to him getting surgery. And he got it removed and he's in a much better position now, but he lost about 100 pounds over that year. And nobody knew what was wrong with him. And so we were taking him and trying to make him eat and finding foods he liked. And the only thing we could get him to eat was ribeyes, mashed potatoes, and mac and cheese. And so I had to make that. It's not a bad meal, but when you're eating it 3 times a week, it starts to get a little old. So you got to come up with new ways to cook the ribeyes. So it did force me to learn a few ways to cook ribeyes. But that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And my professor is actually the one who introduced me. He's my partner now as well. But in my MBA program, he was the one that mentioned this to me when I was in the oil field, because I didn't even mention that part, but I was in the oil field for a while, a little bit during my master's program too. But I was saving some money and I was just saying, hey, what would you do if you had this much money in our area? And he said, non-skilled home health. And I said, okay. I started looking into it. Really didn't find any franchises that I really liked a lot. And so I didn't get into it then. That was back in 2018. Then after taking care of my father-in-law in 2020, I'm like, okay, there's a real need for this. And then I started looking a little harder. Literally like a week after he left post-op, I found HomeWell, the franchise, at the beginning of last year. So I think it was in January of last year. And I was really looking at the franchise. I loved the branding. I loved the ability to get in early and have a lot of territory, especially if I was going to have a partner. I loved a lot of things about it. And then I got to talk with the owners. And the owners were amazing. Everybody was very open, very willing to talk to me and give me some advice when I wanted it. And so I felt very comfortable. It really just felt like I had the right people, the right organization, and several things that were just, the boxes were checked. And so I felt like it was right. It was the right place for me. Yeah.
So let's back up, because I think one of the things as people are understanding HomeWell and really how are they going to be successful, whether it's HomeWell or in a business ownership role, I think with your military background, standard operating procedures, probably know really, really well, probably all too well. But how did your military side of training help you become maybe a better leader? Or what do you think the skill sets that you learned as you were, in the military have helped you with owning a business? Maybe not even talking specifically HomeWell, but in general, like how do you relate those two?
Well, I feel like, there's a chain of command. There's, certain things where you're trying to figure out how to lead the organization from a higher standpoint at a certain point in time. Right now, I think at the beginning, you kind of really got to be involved, and understand all the positions and what's required of them. But after that, you really want to find a way to lead the organization, um, properly with guidance and, um, and I mean, for me, part of it is trying to figure out, I was in the infantry. So when I got in trouble, it's like do 100 push-ups. Now I can't do that, obviously, where I'm at. I can't make everybody low crawl, through the field out back, so, trying to find a way to hold people accountable, and make sure that, everybody knows that and everybody kind of sees that. Like, I've had a couple instances where, I've had to say, hey, we're given opportunities here, but this is not the normal. And, we're holding ourselves to a higher standard here, and having those conversations. And they're difficult conversations. And I think that's probably, the biggest thing is that I'm able to have difficult conversations, regardless the conflict, and trying to not have conflict in those conversations, just being honest, straightforward. And when we're messing up, we talk about why we're messing up. We don't talk about necessarily, you know, everything that was involved in the problem, but why is this happening? How can we stop it from happening going forward? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think again, I think you hit on a key point. It's when you're talking about a business, and especially one in the home healthcare space that is, it's very high touch and high personal. Being, some of the qualities you talk about of having empathy and allowing, people are going to make mistakes in every form of life, and being able to have a constructive conversation around that with your employees, I think makes, you as an owner, but more your business accountable, but also, having the ability, because you still care, because we're still people, right? So
Yep.
how, when you have those difficult conversations, or when you talk about hiring somebody in this industry, when you talk about that, do you set expectations? I guess, what are your hiring practices like? So when they come in, they understand what the culture is you're continually trying to build.
Well, I think you kind of nailed it there as, caring and empathy. And, a lot of it right now in this startup stage is also understanding that we're in a startup stage and things are going to change. And so you got to be prepared for that. I may tell you one thing, today, and it may completely change tomorrow. And for a lot of people, that's difficult, because it's a moving target at times. And I try to minimize that as much as possible. We're getting much better, at that, but just that everybody coming in has to understand that, hey, we're in the startup stage right now. We're still figuring a lot out. How are we going to organize things from time to time? And honestly, as we grow and things start to change, we have to change. I mean, we have to figure out how to scale, uh, with personnel that we currently have, because maybe we don't have the money to hire another $50,000 employee somewhere. So how do we cover that area 60 miles away with the personnel we have? So, and so things have to change with that. and just being prepared for that.
So when you started looking into owning a business, right, a home
Mhm.
or whatever that was, what was your driving for, like, what was your motivation to want to be a business owner? I mean, that's, again, coming out of the military, obviously you have a background in business, right, with an MBA. So you had obviously had some of those skills and acumen already, but why didn't you just go get it? You probably could have got a great job somewhere. What kind of drove you down this path versus going to get a 9 to 5, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it's probably like most of us, I really didn't like working for other people. I mean, it's as simple as that, and it's not about the money. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do, want the benefits for my family in the long run. I mean, but obviously, yes, I could have, instead of borrowing money for a year, I could have been making money for that year. So, and probably made a pretty decent salary. But for me, I really felt like a lot of people that I'd worked for, I would have done things differently. And I wanted the opportunity to really prove to myself that I can do things differently and be successful, and be the one that can make some of those decisions that I wanted to make, and so, yeah.
So when you were going through that decision-making process, what was your biggest fear?
You know, my biggest fear was probably, um, learning whatever business I was going to get involved in. I knew I was going to purchase a business. I mean, I had been looking for probably 2.5 years. I'd been looking at current businesses, return on investment. How do I purchase this and service the debt, and how much profits in it after I do that. There were some industries I felt more compatible with even than this industry. However, in talking with my partner, one of the things he said was, and I had brought a few of those businesses to his attention, and he goes, yeah, that might be good right now, but a lot of that might have to do with COVID. And so you might want to be thinking 10 years down the road, you know? And that's how I made a lot of my thought processes anyway. So it made a lot of sense to me when he said that. I'm like, you know what, you're right. I know there are things I'm more familiar with, but maybe I want to think what's going to be good 10 years from now. And that really made me think that, this could be a good industry and something that I could really put my all into because of what we're doing anyway. We really are helping a lot of people. And so it's something you can get behind and really give it my all, even though I don't maybe know it. I'm willing to do it for the good of it. So
Yeah, I think that's, again, part of the thing when we talk to potential candidates and clients is, there's really got to be two sides to this coin, because the home healthcare space, you have to have a passion for wanting to help people. But you saw the opportunity long term, because this space is not the sexy space that everybody thinks they want to be in, right? They don't want to open up their
mm,
latest fast food restaurant or that, but sustainability and growth opportunity in this market, I think, is a huge driving factor for the long term. And I always use the term, you can't Amazon it. You're not going to order a caregiver off of Amazon to show up at your house, right?
mm,
So does that business have legs? I think you put it eloquently. Is it the growth opportunities, but the sustainability of the business model itself, in every market. So you decided to take the jump and you said, okay, I'm going to do this. That first 120 days, what was that like for you? And just a little bit, because I think that's an important factor. What is that first, hey, I signed on the dotted line, now what did that look like for you?
Well, I probably had some unreasonable expectations, if I'm being honest. So, my partner was on the board of a couple hospitals, and we thought, maybe we could figure some stuff out early, um, and realized that we didn't have the right contacts necessarily for the referral sources and things like that. So, I overhired, hired really too many people, and I didn't know how to do the job really. And so I didn't have any experience in it. And I hired a bunch of people hoping that that had a little bit of experience in it. Um, and I really feel like that's where I made my mistakes, and I made them early, and I learned from them, and I grew a lot from that time too. Hold on one second. My voice. But I the good news is like I say, I did learn quite a bit from that time period, and it forced me when I saw the problems happening to dive in those areas and learn them for myself and figure out what's going wrong and all of those things. And so I'm kind of thankful for those hard times, just because but if I were to give some advice, certainly it would be, I wouldn't hire too many people at the beginning, unless you've just got just phenomenal, unless you've just got, for one, a lot of experience and contacts in your area, in your specific area in the industry, or you've got somebody that you believe has those contacts and you're very, very strong that they have the right contacts with case managers and they have experience doing sales, B2B sales, essentially in this area, because that's what it's going to take. Yeah. But
So how many did you, so you're, when you talk about hiring, you're talking about kind of your internal staff, right?
mhm,
Your
yeah.
salesperson, your HR coordinator. So how many did you start with and how many do you have now?
Well, I started with 4, I think. I started with 4, sorry. And um, now I have about 5 or 6, I don't know, but a lot of them are part-time and they just do little things for me here and there. Like I have some nurses that do some specific things. They do, one of them looks over caregiver notes, and one of them goes out and does assessments, but they have other full-time jobs as well. And they fit those things in, when they have time during the day to fit those things in. And I just pay them a little bit for the work that they do, but they're not full-time, and it's not necessarily needed in a lot of respect. And you'd have to look at your state laws. Every
Right.
state's going to be different when it comes to the nurses and what all is needed. But we do have quite a bit, and we grow and we shrink, and we grow and we shrink right now. I mean, it's a like I say, it's all a learning process. Even still, I mean, a year and a half later, we're still learning a lot. So
Yeah, I think it's with anything, you're going to have the peaks and valleys of, one day you're going to be like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then the next day it's like, holy cow, this is really hard. Right. I
yeah,
think in every business and especially as an owner, you're going to have those peaks and valleys. And it's always fun to weather, but then look back on and say, man, we've accomplished a lot. And to your point earlier, we've helped a lot of people.
yeah.
At the end of the day, that's the goal of what you're trying to do every day. So to kind of wrap it up a little bit, if to somebody starting out brand new, you talked about your advice you would give is not to overhire, kind of start small, but is there anything else you would like to add to say, okay, when you decide to make the jump, you know, really here's the things you should look for, and how has HomeWell helped support you in those things?
Well, I would say the marketing, definitely learn. Michelle Cohn is great, and she has some very great strategies when it comes to the sales and marketing. And at the beginning, if you're not familiar with this, for me at least, it's kind of uncomfortable. I second guessed a lot of stuff, like when I wasn't seeing results quickly. I second guessed a lot of stuff. But the truth is if HomeWell is not in your area, it's going to take a little bit of time for people to even, you know, correlate HomeWell with personal care. It's going to take some time, and so getting in there and just getting your name out there and letting them see you every single week in those same places, going in saying, hey, hey, this is what we do. And at the beginning, it's not even saying this is what we do. It's just saying, hey, I want to know more about you, and learning more about those facilities and things that you're going into and how you might be able to help them. And that's key. And she does a great job of teaching that. And even a lot of the amazing salespeople that I meet, and I'm trying to get advice from them, and they end up giving me saying the key words, and they're verbatim what Michelle Cohn is telling me, the people that have been doing it 20 years in this area. And so, I think that that's very important, learning the sales aspect of it, and really learning the scheduling and stuff as well. I do think hiring caregivers is going to be a huge thing as well. And I always want to win the caregiver battle. And that was my thought process from the very beginning. And so I had an HR person exclusively dedicated to hiring. And I think that's one of the better decisions that I made from the beginning, and it was money, but I really think if you can hire just a good person to have some phone interviews with people, a few hours every day, when you get an opportunity to land those 24-hour clients that other people can't staff, that's really where a good opportunity, you pull a lot of people out of a bad place sometimes. And that gives you the opportunity to go back into some of those places when you can really help someone in a tough time. They really appreciate that. And so you want to be able to do that as much as you can in the beginning, and by hiring as many caregivers as you can and having them ready, you'll get that opportunity more and more. So
do you feel the caregiver side is as challenging as everybody makes it out to be if you're consistently doing it?
I really don't. That hasn't been my experience. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
I can't say that everybody everywhere isn't having problems, but I do think if you are setting up interviews every half hour, 20-minute interviews, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, you're doing orientation. Really, if you need caregivers, I would say do orientation twice a week, to give people some flexibility. If they can't make it on Tuesday, they can make it on Wednesday. Just giving them some flexibility on days helps out quite a bit. And we use Calendly and a lot of other just streamlined processes. We let them pick their own days for interview, their own times for interview. We try to let them have as much say in that as possible, but we just block out 3 or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they can pick them, and they're scheduled, and they get messages sent day of and day before that their interview's coming up, and it's really streamlined. And I think that's helped us quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the process of that, and as we talk to, candidates who are, that's a big question that comes up. And I think the theme is, if you're constantly just consistent with it, then it's not an issue. I think where a lot of owners get hung up is they think they're in a good spot. And then to your point, they get that 24-hour, 7-day-a-week client that calls, and now they're scrambling. And so I think it's the message of just, it's a constant process. That's what this is.
You're going to lose caregivers all the time, especially if you're constantly hiring, right? Because if you're constantly hiring, you're not always going to have hours. You're going to have slow months. It's going to drop. It's a cyclic. Like we had almost 800 hours one month and dropped down to 450 the next month. And now we're steadily climbing back up. And so that's going to happen. And you're going to have new baselines you kind of set for yourself, where our floor is getting higher, every month, our floor, so we don't go below a certain amount. But sometimes we get really high and sometimes we come back down. But, to me, the goal really is to constantly be hiring for when you lose those older ones that went and found another full-time job somewhere else while you were trying to find them hours. You got a new person coming in now that's hungry and wanting some hours, and you have someone ready to jump on those clients that come in. Because I mean, I've picked up 3 24/7s, which take about 20 caregivers or more full-time hours to staff. And that's not easy to do unless you're constantly hiring. I mean, that's very hard to find 20 people for 40 hours a week to jump on some clients like that. But if you're constantly hiring, you should be able to do that.
Awesome. Final question. Where do you see your business going, and what are your goals?
Well, I think, I expect to grow at least double every year for the next couple of years. I mean, that would be my expectation. And then I would really like to take the state of Arkansas, the entire state. I mean, right now we've got a good chunk of central Arkansas and we're making a lot of headway. Our name's getting out there. People are recognizing us more and more and calling us more and more. And so, that's my goal, is to have the state of Arkansas, the entire state with HomeWell, and to grow pretty considerably in the next 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, again, we can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy day to spend 30 minutes with us. And again, can't thank you enough for your service to this country and all you've done. We're so glad you're a part of our HomeWell family, and we wish you the best as we continue on and grow your business. So thank you again, everybody, for joining today, and we'll go ahead and stop recording.